Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you today. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends, parents, fellow parents. How many of you are parents? Please raise your hand. Wonderful. Me too. Me too. How many of you, as I'm looking out there, are young children? Raise your hand. Young children? How many of you used to be young children at one time and could maybe remember it? Good, wonderful, wonderful. We're going to have a presentation today. We're going to talk about the most important topic in the entire world. And I don't care if we're talking about the United Arab Emirates, or if we're talking about the United States, or if we're talking about any country from Angola to Zimbabwe. The most important topic that I can think of that any group of people could talk about is the care and education of our young children, and how we can give them the very best opportunity for success in life throughout their entire lives. That's what we're here to talk about today. But first I want to say a very sincere thank you from my colleagues and I from Yale University to the Salama bin Hamdan Al Nahyan Foundation for this wonderful opportunity to be able to share our expertise here in the service of your children. And so with that being said, let's move forward with today's presentation. We're going to provide a little bit of a smart shopper's guide to those of you who might be in the business of thinking about what kind of early care and education program you would like to have for your child. First off, we're going to start by talking a little bit about the overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Some of this is going to be reminiscent of some of the things that we talked about in last year's Muntara on the topic of early childhood. And so if you were at that, some of it might sound familiar. But then from that point on, we're going to talk about some new material. We're going to start off by talking about a little bit of an overview and review of what we talked about last year regarding the importance of the early years and the importance of early care and education. And then from that point on, we're going to talk about how you can become a better shopper in terms of thinking about the early care and education experiences that you're able to provide for your children and what those would look like as you're going out to actually purchase this kind of a program for children. Let's start off by talking about 4 things that we know from decades of research on the care and education of young children. The first thing that we know is the first few years of life, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of life are extremely crucial for setting the stage for the foundation of all later learning that's going to happen afterwards. That foundation can be either a firm foundation, a stable foundation, or it can be a very fragile foundation, all on the basis of the way in which we interact with our young children in the very first years of life. Why is that true? Well, first off, we know from research that the types of experiences that a young child has in the first few years of life can have dramatic impacts even on the architecture of their brain. From studies such as this, looking at the differences in the brain mass and structure of 3-year-old children who are normally and typically developing versus those who have undergone extreme neglect. And in this slide, you can see very clearly the differences. We're talking about differences in size, we're talking about differences in density. Pretty stark. We also know that in the first 2-3 years of life, the amount of synaptic development that's happening in the brain is unparalleled to any other time in life. They're forming millions of connections all the time in their brain, connecting one part of the brain to the next, laying down the basic architecture of what their brain is going to be like and what their brain is going to be capable of doing, all in the first few years of life. If there's ever a time that we can be more impactful in the development of our children, it will be during the time when they're laying down the architecture of what their brain is going to be like, and that's in the very first few years of life. And we know also from economic analyses, looking at the cost-benefit analyses and the return on investment that you get when you invest in human capital, that when you invest in the earliest years, you get the biggest return on the investment. This is a slide from a Nobel Prize-winning economist, Jim Heckman. Jim Heckman was looking at the return on investment that you get by investing in children of various different ages all the way into adulthood, and basically he found across many different studies that the earlier you invest, the greater the return on investment. The greater the return on investment for the individual that you're investing in, and the greater the return on investment to society and to the nation that's making that investment. These are important things for us to be thinking about both as individual citizens and collectively as governments. Number 2, the family is the first and foremost important teacher in the lives of children. We know this because babies come to us pre-wired, ready to learn. Nobody has to teach a baby how to learn. Babies come out, they're born, and they are ready to be able to soak up all the things that are available to them within their environment. And we also know that as soon as the baby is born, the parents become wired and ready to be parents. We know that in the first few moments of a baby's life, what does that baby want to do? The baby is actually designed to seek out and look for something, anything that looks like a face, to lock in on that face, make eye contact with it, and engage in that. Why? Because it's important to that baby forms a strong relationship to some adult who will be there to care for that child. They come to us ready to do that, and we as parents become ready to accept that. We undergo hormonal changes that change the way in which we are ready to receive and form a relationship with a new child, and that hormonal change happens for the mothers and it happens for the fathers. And did you hear what I said? The hormonal changes happen for the fathers too, if they're involved and they're there for it to happen. It's an amazing, amazing thing. What else do we know? Number 3, children learn through relationships. That's why those relationships that are being formed are extremely important. It becomes the basic foundation by which children actually learn everything that they will ever need to learn. Language is a great example of that. Babies come out and they're born. I'm going to steal a move from a hero of mine, Dr. Barry Brazelton, pediatrician in the United States, who would sometimes on the stage bring out the baby and hold the baby there. There's something that we call serve and volley. In serve and volley, the baby does something, we see it, and we tend to respond. Babies will sometimes go grrr, or they'll go hoo, or they'll make some kind of ba-ba-ba sound. And when they do that, what do we as adults typically do when we hear the baby do that? What's the first thing we do? We usually smile, we light up, make some kind of sound like that, and then what do? We often imitate it. And then the baby hears that, and then the baby does it back to us. And then we hear that, and we do it back to the baby. Who's actually teaching whom in this relationship? Absolutely. The baby initiates this in most cases, and the parents return it. They're set up, they're designed to do this. They are designed to make us better teachers. They are designed to make us better parents, if only we listen to them when we interact with them. And what happens in the course of these interactions is that the baby solidifies language as a way to communicate, just like that communication that's happening right there, right now. She's telling us something, that baby's telling us something, and mommy knew exactly what it was. So, baby's doing this, interacting with us, we're interacting with the baby, baby's learning language. In what context is that baby learning the language? It's learning language within the context of this human relationship that's happening there. Many parents will remember the day when their child on one day was sitting on a chair and they were looking at some object that they wanted to have, like maybe an object over there, and they would reach, and they would try to reach the object. And then on the very next day, the baby didn't do that. The baby instead looked at mommy and went, He isn't really trying to reach it anymore. Baby's starting to communicate. And the baby will learn words, milk, juice. Why? Because it's a tool. Why is it a tool? Because of this human relationship that's been created. All the learning that happens within the life of this baby is going to happen within the context of human relationships. And that's something important for us to understand, whether we're talking about parents or early childhood educators in a child care facility or an early education facility. The amount of language development that happens in the first few months of life is absolutely astonishing. When it starts to take off, it takes off extremely dramatically. And that becomes an important point for us to be able to make huge impacts in the life of the child's language development, whether it's Arabic or English or both or other languages as well. Number 4, we also know that high-quality early care and education programs can have lasting and important impacts on the lives of children. We know this from, at this point, about 5 decades worth of research on the topic. We know this from studies such as the Perry Preschool Program, which was a study that began in 1964. In 1964, a group of children in Ypsilanti, Michigan were randomly assigned to either go to a high-quality preschool program or to not. And at that time, there were no other preschool programs. So it was a clean evaluation. We were evaluating high-quality preschool programs versus access to no specific preschool program. And you can see the impacts on this slide. They've been following these children ever since. 1964 was when it began. Children were 4 years old. So how old are they now? 54 years old. They're still following them. Still following them. These are some of the impacts that they were able to find. There's also the Abecedarian Project, which found some very similar findings, as well as the Harlem study that found some other findings. Even when we implement these programs on a large scale across entire states in the United States, we tend to find significant impacts in the lives of children when we provide even a mediocre quality preschool program. But when we provide a high-quality preschool program, then the impacts are actually very much astonishing. And when we do cost-benefit analyses on those impacts, then it really drives home the point that we're not just talking about something nice and good to do for children. We are talking about something nice and good to do for children, and it is our job to do nice, good things for children. But we're also talking about an investment, and an investment that pays off in time, because every dollar that goes into the program yields back societal savings, because we've made a good investment in the lives of our children. Special services cost money. Grade retention costs money. Not going to college costs money in terms of lifetime earnings, in terms of taxes paid, in terms of the amount of social services necessary to be able to support somebody. And so when you aggregate all of those things up and you look at the amount of money that goes into the program versus the amount of money that's actually saved to society later on, this is why many advanced countries are thinking of early care and education as the single most important investment from a human capital standpoint that they can possibly make. And the earlier they can make it, the better, because they'll get more return on the buck. Why? Because the earlier you make this investment, the more impactful it is, and the longer you have of a child's life to be able to actually accumulate returns on that investment. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? But I don't want you to think that when we're talking about these return on investments that we're only talking about academic skills. Some of the times we talk about things called soft skills. Soft skills are the more pliable plastic skills that we have that help us be able to get along with other people. They include some of the things that are here on the screen. Things that many people would think of as social skills or motivational skills or interpersonal skills or creativity skills. We know from an awful lot of research that a lot of the impact that you get from a high-quality preschool program is not only in the academic side, but also in these areas that when you survey employers, typically they rate these as the most important when they're making employment decisions. And absolutely they become the most important during promotional decisions and retention decisions. People don't typically get fired for being ineffective at their jobs. They typically get fired because of not having these skills right here. So what does the science tell us in terms of early care and education programs and what we can understand about them? Well, first off, early education programs can have huge lasting impacts on the lives of children. We've already talked about that. Number two, only high-quality preschool programs tend to have those impacts. Many studies over the years have looked at the overall impact of early care and education programs and have found out that it's really only the extremely high-quality programs that are actually giving you those impacts. High-quality programs give you strong impacts. Mediocre quality programs tend to give you no impacts. And extremely poor quality programs can actually be harmful to children. And that's why it's important for us to be able to be good consumers when we're making decisions about the type of quality of program that we're going to be actually purchasing for our young children. Number three, high quality doesn't just happen magically. It's something that has to be planned for. It takes planning in terms of what the facility will look like, how you're going to staff that facility with extremely well-trained teachers and professionals who know exactly what they're doing, and how that program is going to be structured. Building the facility is the beginning. All of the other stuff also is extremely important. And all together it creates a package that can have a huge impact on the lives of the children and the families that participate in it. So, what is a high-quality preschool program? What does it look like? Well, first off, it's an engaging place where children go and they learn through relationships. So what should you see? You should see a lot of learning, but you should also see a lot of relationships. You should see a lot of interactions between the adults and the children, the adults and the other adults and the parents, the children and the children. Lots of relationships, lots of exchanges, lots of learning through that. Also, it's a place that's very welcoming to parents. You should see parents feeling welcome and being welcomed there. Lots of communication between the program and the parents. You should also see a place that seems to value children learning through creativity and their interests, and a place that teaches children how to fall in love with learning. Oftentimes what I tell to parents, or I tell preschool teachers or early educators, is that if at the end of our program children know a few letters, a few numbers, a few colors, and in the process have learned to hate going to school, then we have not won any battles. But if in the process of our early care and education programs they become creative, they feel that they are good learners, that they enjoy being at school, they enjoy being challenged, they enjoy learning, then I will guarantee you all those other academic things will come in time. The most important thing is creating lifelong learners, and then you allow the learning to happen as it happens later on. This is not what a high-quality early childhood program is like. It's not a place designed to force information into the heads of children, to cram information into the heads of children. Take a look at this cartoon. Mother's there getting ready to give birth to the child. Father's over here with a flashcard saying, apple. And the doctor's over here saying, he's not even out yet. His head's still in there. This is not the kind of thing that we want for a preschool program. Preschool programs are not a place to take children before school and try and cram as much stuff into it as possible. And the reason why is that you don't have to. You simply do not have to cram information into the head of a child, because the child is a sponge. All you have to do is make the opportunities available, set the stage for the child to do the learning, and the learning will happen in course. No cramming necessary. So what are the elements of a high-quality preschool program? What does it look like? Usually we break these down into two different groups: structural variables and process variables. Structural quality, process quality. Some people call the structural hardware, and some people call the process quality software. Well, that's a good way of thinking about it, I suppose. So what is the structural quality? Structural quality is typically the things that are relatively easy to see, relatively easy to measure, and in many cases relatively easy to legislate in policies. It includes some of the things on the board here. What are the process quality? Process quality is a little bit more complicated. They tend to be a little harder to measure. You have to actually go and see it for yourself in order to actually know whether it's happening or not. You can't ask somebody a question. You can't count these things. You got to use your actual eyeballs when you're assessing them. It includes the things that are up here on the screen right here. So, what are the 7 key structural variables that you want to look for? This is your shopping guide right here. Number 1, teachers with degrees in early childhood care and education, and assistants who have some kind of specialized training in working with young children. That's what you're wanting to look for. But on the other hand, you have to realize that degrees and specialized training are not a perfect metric for a great teacher. I've certainly ran into some teachers who have no specific training and degrees, who by some amazing thing are wonderful teachers and do a wonderful job with children. And unfortunately, I've ran into teachers who sometimes have master's degrees in early care and education who really should not be in a classroom with young children. And so it's not a perfect measure, but it is at least a reasonably good measure, and it tells you a little bit about the center's investment in a professionalized workforce. So that's one thing to look at. Another thing to think about too along this is that the degree itself doesn't necessarily tell you much about the way in which that child's going to interact with the children. One thing that I've never seen in my 25 years in this field is I've never seen a young child in a preschool program walk up to a parent or a teacher and say, "Teacher, what degree do you have? Do you have a master's degree? Is it in early care and education, or is it in forestry or something like that? Because I need to know whether you're qualified to teach me or not." I've never seen a child do that, but if a child were to ask a question of a teacher, these would be the types of questions that the child would be asking a teacher. Not questions about degrees, not questions about whether they earned their degree or the quality of their degree or what kind of coursework they had, but questions that really relate to how that teacher is interacting with the child. These kinds of questions right here. And when you walk into a classroom and you watch the way the teachers interact with the children, you can probably gauge pretty well how each child in the classroom would answer those questions. Number 2, high-quality preschool programs and early care and education programs engage in continuous coaching efforts. By continuous coaching efforts, what I mean is that the most rigorous research that we have on how you make early educators better at their job is not really through pre-service training, not usually through universities, although it can be helpful, but rather through actual coaching in the classroom while the teacher is there with the children. What I mean by that is somebody who's coming into the classroom, watching the teacher, observing, seeing how that teacher's interacting with the children, and then coaches the teacher on how to think about things differently, how to interact in different ways with the children, how to try different kinds of techniques. Think about it this way. If I were to think of any problem that we have in teacher training, whether we're talking about early childhood education or cycle 1, the elementary school, cycle 2, middle school, cycle 3, high school, or especially college, the problem is this. We think that we can teach teachers to teach as if teaching were an academic subject. But I can tell you this, teaching is not an academic subject. Teaching is not like math, it's not like history, it's not like science. Teaching is not an academic subject at all. Teaching is a performing art. And if we were really serious about education in any country, we would be teaching teachers the way we teach performing artists. We would never take a performing artist, a dancer, and get a group of dancers together, put them in an auditorium, and then give them a lecture on the history of dance. We would never teach a football player how to play football by putting them in an auditorium and then giving them a lecture on the physics of the ball. What would we do instead? We would get on the field with that teacher, with that performing artist, and we would coach them in the middle of the game and through the games, because that's how you make people better at the things that they're doing, when the things they're doing is a performing art. And I can tell you this, any teacher that I've ever seen that was really great was by all means, first and foremost, a performing artist in that classroom with the children that they're working with. Number 3, you're looking for teachers who are well compensated, well respected, and well supported, because you want those teachers to actually be there for some period of time. You don't want a revolving door. You don't want a program where teachers come in, they hang out for a year or two, then they go off someplace else where they can get some more money. You don't want a program where children and teachers come in for a year or two and then leave because the working conditions are so bad they don't really want to be there. Why don't you want to do that? Because of a lot of reasons. And one of the big reasons is the fact that you want to have a program where the teaching staff is stable so that the children can form a stable relationship to those teachers. If the teachers aren't well compensated and well supported, then you're not going to be able to form the kinds of relationships necessary for children to be able to optimize their learning. And in the end, all the training that you do will go out the door with those teachers. And so the ability of the program to be able to sustain the training that's going into the program has a lot to do with the ability of that program to be able to hold on to the working staff. Because if the staff leaves the program, then all the money that you put into training the staff is leaving out the door with the staff. And so one of the things you definitely want to look for is whether or not the staff has been there for a while, whether teacher turnover rates are really high, whether the staff has at least on average been there 3, 4, 5, or 6 years. The longer the better. My child's preschool teacher when she was 4 years old in KG4 was a man who had been in the same classroom for 30 years. 3-0. And the assistant teachers who had been with him for quite a long time too. Also, group size and teacher-child ratios. And if I were to pick one of the two, I'd probably go with teacher-child ratios. You want those as small as you can. This chart gives you some suggestions on exactly what you're looking for depending on the age of the child. Now, if you'll notice, for the younger children, we're talking about much fewer children per adult, and as the children get older, there can be more children per adult. These are optimized numbers. It might be hard to find this. You can go a little bit more on some of these for the older kids, but not much more. This is what you're actually looking for right here. I've had a few people ask me, how many children, when they're infants, before they can walk, should a teacher really be working with? I say, well, that's a good question. Before they walk. So I'll say, well, let's think about it. How many are we designed for? I got 1, 2. 2. That's my number. That'd be the absolute best. Problem is, it's not economically viable because the cost of 2 per 1 would be way too expensive. And the research does tell us that a really good teacher can work with 3 to 1 in a ratio when you're talking about infants. If you get much more than that, not only is the teacher not very effective, but it actually could be an extremely unsafe environment for the child. It's extremely easy for a child when they're that age to become harmed in a very small period of time. When you have a teacher in an active room with more than 3 children to pay attention to at once, when they're infants, it will be extremely easy for something not so good to happen. Imagine also if there's a need to evacuate the building quickly. How many children can she carry out the door with her? I mean, these are the things to sort of think about in terms of thinking about teacher-child ratios. Another thing, number 5, a predictable weekly and daily schedule. What do I mean by that? I mean a program where the children are going there on a regular schedule, either every day or every other day or something like that, and within the day, things happen with some degree of regularity. When you watch it, it should seem like the children who are in the classroom know what the daily schedule is. They know what's happening now and they know what's going to happen later. The transitions should be smooth as a result of them knowing that. The children should not seem like they have absolutely no idea what's going on. They shouldn't be children who either come in or they don't come in, they drop out, they don't start at a particular time. You're not looking for drop-in, because if you have a drop-in care program, you're basically just getting babysitting. There's no way that the teacher can really implement curriculum, really implement a high-quality early learning environment if she has no idea when the children are going to be there or not be there. So you're looking for something with some degree of regularity in terms of the daily schedule as well as the weekly schedule. Number 6, ample support staff that's necessary to create a safe environment and an educational environment and all the supports necessary for the parents to be able to do the best job that they can. And it includes all these professionals that we have up here, beginning first and foremost with an administrator, a director who understands early childhood care and education extremely well and knows how to supervise the teachers in the room. And in addition to that administrator, also a whole host of other people, like the people that Dr. Laspada was talking about earlier that would be in the Center of Excellence. These are people designed to be able to be consultants to the teachers, to help the teachers understand language development and how each individual child's language is developing and what that teacher needs to be doing. And also people who can be speaking to the parents and providing consultation to the parents regarding language development and what those parents could be doing at home that would be supportive to what the teacher's attempting to do in the program. And I can also go into physical therapy and other types of areas. These are the support staff that all teachers need to be wrapped around in order to be able to have the supports they need in order to be able to do the type of job that they need to do. But it also includes with the and everybody else category. I can't list everybody up here because it really includes everybody, including the custodial staff, the people who are making the lunch and the meals, the groundskeepers. There's a story about a reporter who went to NASA, America's Outer Space Exploration Agency. The reporter came in there, they were waiting for some big important person to come in and give a talk about space exploration in the United States. And the reporter was waiting for this person and decided to ask a few questions of other people that were there. Went up to a janitor who was emptying a trash can and asked the janitor, "What's your job here at NASA?" And you know what the janitor said? To put a man on the moon. That's what the janitor said. I want to go into a child care program. I want to go into preschool programs where I see the janitorial staff and the kitchen aides, and I ask them, what's your job here? And they say to make the world a better place for babies. That's what I'm looking for, and that's the kind of program that you should be looking for too, where everybody in there has the same solitary mission of doing the very best they can by every single child in there, because you never know which adult that child may have the strongest relationship to. It might not be the teacher. It could be other people too. All these people are important. Number 7, an appropriate physical environment. Start with safety, And for the most part, you can kind of walk in and you can get a sense of whether or not this appears to be a safe environment for young children, but you got to think about it from the perspective of really young children. Can anybody think of what one of the #1 most common causes of accidents and injury in a child care program or an early education program is for babies? Doors. Doors that swing open into areas where children are playing. So you want to look at things like that. You want to look at the way in which the place is structured. You want to make sure that things aren't able to be accessed by the child that could be harmful to the child. They're locked away. They're put in some kind of a special place. You want to look to make sure that either the building was built specifically with young children in mind, or if it was renovated from another purpose, that it was renovated clearly with young children in mind. Adequate sight lines. That's another thing that you want to look for. Ways and opportunities for the children to be able to work in small little cubby areas, but the adults to be able to look down and see them and be able to monitor everywhere that they are. You want to look for a cozy home-like environment. It shouldn't feel institutional. It should seem like a place that children would actually want to be, a place that's similar to home. It should be stimulating with lots to do, but it shouldn't be overwhelming. It should be decorated with the child's perspective in mind. Children's artwork should be displayed, but it should not be displayed here. Why should it not be displayed here? Because that's my eye level. That's not the child's eye level. Decorated here. If we want the children to own the space, then it needs to be decorated by the children, and it needs to be decorated with the child's perspective in mind, with the child actually being able to place that stuff on the walls. 4 key process variables that you're looking for. #1, warm and inviting environment for young children, where children are greeted individually. You can tell that pretty easily when you walk in, or said goodbye to individually when the children are leaving at the end. Adults speaking to children at eye level. So when they're talking to children, they're actually showing them some degree of respect by getting at their eye level and talking to them directly, not standing over top of them and lording over them and talking to them down here like this, forcing the child to listen to them like that. Lots of facilitated two-way communication. What you don't want to see is a lot of do this, do that, don't do that, don't do this, stand over there, stop doing that. You don't want to see a lot of no's. Rather, you want to see a lot of two-way communication where the teacher is talking with the children, not to the children. Why? Because that's how language develops. You're not going to get very much language development out of a teacher who's just making commands to the children all day long. You're going to get language development out of the children when there's actual two-way communication going in both directions. And so you need a teacher who understands that, and you can pretty easily see that. Also, teachers who are sensitive to the needs of the children and are aware of everything that's happening. In some of the cases, we call that teachers with eyes in the back of their heads. They can understand that here's a child who needs my attention right now, and at the same time understand and see what's going on over here. But it takes a very special person to be able to do that. Not easy to do. Teachers who move around a lot. You don't want to see a teacher who just sits someplace and all the action's happening around there. You want to see a teacher who's actually in there with the children, interacting with the children, moving and getting up and down and all over the place. A clear daily routine that the children seem to understand. A small number of carefully selected rules that are consistently enforced. Not a lot of rules, not a slew of rules that the teacher can't possibly be able to enforce all of them, but a relatively small number that's consistently enforced so that the children can understand what the routine of the day is. No rules, no routine. No routine, and children feel unsafe. And when they feel unsafe, there's very little learning that happens. Also, teachers who teach with their hands and their heads and their hearts. And that's not hard to be able to see. You can tell when that's happening. With their hands, I want to see a teacher who's actually moving around and doing something. With their head, I want to see a teacher who's thinking. A teacher who's making decisions, not a teacher who's implementing a curriculum in just this way because the book said to do it just that way, but a teacher who's watching the cues that the children are giving and making decisions on the basis of that cue. Very observable things. And by heart, you can pretty much tell that too. You can see the evidence of the heart oftentimes in the face. Is the adults smiling when they look at the children? Do they seem like they want to be here? Do they seem like they love their job? Number two, active parental involvement in partnerships. There was a study done by a man named Arthur Reynolds, who was looking at two different theories for how children learn in early care and education programs. The two theories around at the time were that the preschool programs caused some kind of cognitive development to happen for the children that then caused them to be more ready for school, and then they succeeded better later as a result of that. The other theory was that perhaps preschool programs are more successful at engaging parents in the learning. And as a result of engaging parents in the learning, that parental engagement and involvement was what was responsible for later success in elementary school. And basically what Arthur Reynolds found was that both of them seemed to be true, to almost equal levels. And so you certainly want to see a program that's focused on parents as an active participant in the program. Parents should feel welcomed. They should be welcomed in the program. They should be present. You should be seeing them as volunteers. They should have respect. The teachers and the staff should know each other, respect each other, like each other. I've done some research looking at children who've been expelled from preschool programs because of challenging behaviors. And I can tell you this, after seeing and hearing about hundreds of cases of children being expelled from preschool programs because of their behavior problems, I have never seen a case where a child was kicked out of a preschool program where the teacher and the parent knew and liked each other. I've never seen that happen. And if you can form a strong relationship between those two people, or those several people because there's more than one parent, then you can oftentimes weather a lot of storms. The first time that a teacher talks to a parent should not be when a behavior problem is happening. It should have been way before that. It should have been during the transition of that child into that program where the parent becomes known to the teacher and the teacher becomes known to the parent, and they form a strong relationship even before the first day that that child ever steps into the preschool program. That's one of the things you're looking for. Lots of communication between the parents and the staff, and a well-planned transitional program of how to get the children from the home into the program on the first day. And by a well-planned transition program, what I mean is this. It's a whole lot easier for a child to go their first day to a preschool program when they already have met and knew the teacher. And so there's absolutely no reason that we shouldn't be making sure that parents go to the children's homes before the first day of school to meet the parents, get to be known to the parents, become friends with the parents, let the child see and experience the teacher, and then when the child goes to the first day, they're not going to some strange place with a strange person. They might be going to a strange place, but it won't be with a strange person. And that's one of the things that you're looking for also in a high-quality preschool program, one that thinks about those transitions. Number three, well-planned transitions. If you want to look for any kind of a flaw in a teacher's ability, and you want to see whether that teacher is really high quality or not, look at the way in which they transition from one activity to the next. That's where it's going to show up. And so what you're really looking for is you're looking for teachers who can go from a small group activity to a large group activity and do that in a way where the transitions are well planned and well managed, everything runs smoothly, where the transitions aren't protracted and too long, but rather paced at the right pace for the young child. And if you want to look for any one singular thing that would be an indicator of whether a teacher is a really good quality teacher or not, it's the way that teacher handles those transition moments. Number four, a well-planned curriculum. And by well-planned curriculum, I'm talking about a curriculum where the teacher sets the stage for all the learning that's going to happen in that classroom that day. All the things should be laid out in just the right way, and the teacher should look like she has a plan in mind when those children actually arrive in the classroom. We're talking about a curriculum that appears to flow out of the interests of the children. It's not one where the adult is forcing that curriculum on the child, but rather one that's taking advantage of the fact that the strongest motivational force in that classroom in terms of that child's learning is that child's creativity and interests and motivations and that child's relationship to the adult, not whether or not the adult is able to figure out the right thing to force into the child. And then finally, a curriculum that addresses all of the needs of the child, not just cognitively, but also the child as a social emotional human, as a language human, as a motoric human who needs to use their gross motor and fine motor skills and addresses the whole child in all of these different ways. There's many different curricula that are available on the market right now. Some of these names you probably recognize. There's the high scope curriculum, creative curriculum, Montessori programs that I know are available here in the UAE. Reggio Emilia, which is a preschool program that's based largely on learning through the arts and artistic expression with children. Many different types of curricula, and so then the question becomes, well, which one do you choose? And when you ask a teacher, you know, what kind of curricula do you use? How do you know which one is the best? Well, there's actually been some studies on trying to figure out what is the best curriculum. There's one study that was done back in the early 70s, which actually today is probably still the best study ever done, comparing one curriculum to the next. They had several different curricula. They assigned some teachers to teach one curriculum and another teachers to teach another curriculum, trained the teachers on the curriculum, and then evaluated the effects of the curricula on the children. Do you know what they found? No differences. None at all. But when they looked closer, they found that there was something that actually did predict how much the children were learning. And that was the quality of the instruction that was happening between the teachers and the child. It seemed to be that it mattered not very much what the teacher said she was doing, but more what the teacher actually was doing in the classroom. And so if the curriculum basically is what the teacher says she implements, that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is what actually happens in the classroom and how those relationships actually look. That said, let me give you a little quick look at what a particular curriculum would actually look like. This is going to be a short clip, about 2 minutes long, of a Montessori classroom. You're going to get a sense at the beginning of the different types of materials that are in there, and then you're going to get a sense of how the children are actually using those materials. Notice that it appears that the teachers actually set out a stage for the children to explore, that there was some thought that was put into exactly what was out there and how it was going to be used. And notice that you don't have all the children doing the same thing all the time, but rather adults that are interacting with the children, sometimes in larger groups, sometimes in smaller groups, sometimes just individually. Particular classroom could look like. Now, one of the things that I wanted and hope that you were able to see in there is that there was many different types of activities Children weren't only doing one thing. The children appeared to be very interested in the things that they were doing. Lots of ways in which the teachers can support that learning and inject language into the learning. But for the most part, the children were really driving the curriculum. The teachers were not driving the curriculum. The teachers were just setting up the curricular opportunities around them, setting a stage and allowing the children to be the actors within that play. And the teachers there as support mechanisms. That's what you're looking for in a high-quality preschool program. One of the other things that I want you to think about too is teachers should be like artists. We talked about that before. Teachers should be like performing artists. And an artist needs to have more than one color on the palette. An artist needs to have more than one brush. And so it's a good thing for a teacher to be able to have more than one curricular opportunity, to be able to draw upon several different curricula in order to be able to follow the needs of each individual child, which may span across many different curricular things. You wouldn't want to hire somebody to build a home for you who only had one tool. You would want somebody who had multiple tools to be able to get the job done. And it's the same thing with a teacher. You need a teacher who's well-trained across many different curricula. I remember one extremely high-quality preschool teacher once asked by a parent, "What curriculum do you teach at your school?" And the teacher looked at the parent and said, "I don't teach curriculum. I teach children." And that's what you're looking for. That's what you're looking for. One who sees the curriculum as a tool, not as an outcome. The outcome is what you're able to help provide to the individual children. The curriculum is a tool for it. It's not the other way around. Children are not the tools you need in order to be able to complete the curriculum. But every once in a while we get it wrong. And as consumers, you need to be able to make sure that you're getting it right when you're picking which ones are going to be, as teachers, working with your children. So let me give you a little bit of an example of what it looks like when a teacher is able to work across multiple curriculums within a framework of something that we refer to as emergent curriculum. Emergent curriculum is this notion that the curriculum actually can come out of the child in co-construction with the teachers in the classroom. You'll get a sense of this as I go through these pictures. This is a picture of New Haven, Connecticut, home to Yale University. You can see 3 churches on a green. You can see, if you look up in the upper right-hand side, some buildings that look like Yale University because they are Yale University. This picture was taken from the 19th floor of a hotel, looking down on the New Haven Green and all the tall buildings behind it. And when this picture was taken, there was a group of KG2 children, 5-year-old children, up on top of the 19th floor, looking down on New Haven so that they can see what the city in which they live in and go to school looks like. So, children all had this one experience, and then they went back to the early care and education program. What did the children then do spontaneously? Well, this one child decided to make a drawing of what he just saw. This is his map. This is what he saw. This is what he drew. Can you see the churches? You can see the flagpole. 5-year-old child. And then they decided to build New Haven out of some blocks. You can see what the different block designs looked like, the flags. You can see these 2 girls and a boy built some of the tall buildings. They noticed that in some cases, cars were able to drive underneath the building to park. So they built a way for the cars to park, which of course gave an opportunity for the teacher to ask them, why do you think there needs to be a place for the cars to park? What do you think is going on with that? Lots of opportunity for language and for the teachers to teach the children about not only buildings, but the way in which the world around them is structured, and the whole idea of work and commuting and things like that. All because the children went up on top of a building and looked down and saw their city. Here's another child with her buildings. 2 children. Using collage representations, children went to see a swan in a park, came back to the classroom. This is what one child remembered seeing. This is what another child remembered seeing. They saw the same swan. They remembered it differently. This child focused on the swan flying away. Noticed the little egg left behind. One child remembered the swan this way. Another child remembered the swan this way, or this way. It's one of my favorites. The swan in a sleepy kind of position. Object printing. Teaching the children to be able to use blocks, put them in the ink, make a stamp. Using blocks, blocks are made up of lines, and you can also use circles. And when you think about it, our alphabet, whether it's English or Arabic, is made up of parts of lines and parts of circles. Curves, straight areas. Letting the children basically just explore with them, because eventually when they explore with the lines and the circles, they'll realize that you can combine them together to make something very unique, or something that represents something else. Like this child, who created a representation of a girl using nothing more than circles and lines. Circles and lines, circles and lines. You'll get from a lot of the children lots of variations on cars and trucks, maybe a child playing with a ball. This child says that's Lemon, her cat. Can anybody guess what this is? What do you think it might be? Somebody say Superman? Yeah, that's a good guess. What do you think? What else? Yeah? Yeah. That's a real good guess. It's hard to tell sometimes when you're a teacher. And so, of course, what you do is you don't say, oh, that's a, and then name something, and the child says, no, that's not that. You might as well be saying, well, that's not very good. So you say to the child, you say, oh, that's wonderful. What is that? This child said, it's a motorboat, leaving splashes behind it. Obviously, as viewed by looking down on it, just like the children were looking down on New Haven from 19 floors higher. And so he was drawing a representation of this boat with the motor there and all the splashes coming behind it. Stairs. Children see it every day. They'll see it in the preschool programs in many cases. They'll see it in their homes. They'll see it in office buildings. They can build them with their blocks. They can build them this way and wonder what could possibly be underneath the stairs. And then start to wonder about the next set of stairs they see and how it's made and how it's constructed and what could be underneath it. They could understand that you can use a stair-step motif and way of thinking about buildings and architecture. You could think about stairs as opposed to ramps, which then can bring up lots of interesting conversation about when you see ramps, how you use ramps, why ramps exist. Curves. In this one kindergarten program, they were learning about curves, and the children made a book of curves. You can make curves out of curves. Here's one girl named Lila. She drew a picture of her face. And on her picture, she says, my eyebrows are a curve too. Your cheeks have a curve. Your ears make a curve on the bottom, and your mouth has a curve when you smile. She was thinking about curves. She drew it. She was talking about the curves. Lots of language, lots of visual processing. You can think about curves within architecture. These are all straight blocks that the children were then curious, could you make curved structures out of straight blocks? This way or this way? See the curves? Interesting, huh? 4 or 5-year-old. Could you maybe make curves like an igloo? Children decided to make an igloo with the help of an adult who came into the classroom to help them. Children wrote a letter to their teachers. Can you read it? It says, Dear preschool teachers, we would like to pick up your empty milk and juice bottles. And they signed it kindergarten. And they gave this to the teachers. Teachers gave them their empty milk bottles, and then they worked with the adult to try to figure out a way in which you could actually craft that into a curved spherical structure that you could get inside and play. Representations of art. Took the children to the Yale Art Gallery, where they saw lots of different representations of art. And as they looked at it, they noticed that you can use light in creative ways to be able to make artistic expressions by arranging transparencies in different ways. They saw a pastel of daisies, and so they went back to the preschool program and drew their own daisies in various different configurations and looks. Exploring patterns. Do you see the pattern here? Several different rows, and the final row is the first one of each one of the rows. Child has made that up on her own, thinking about the patterns that she sees and can create. And of course you can take those patterns and then you can use those patterns to represent something else. You can see a pattern in a rainbow, and you can recreate that pattern in many different ways. So, these are ways in which any kind of a curriculum or multiple different curriculums can be used as the child is exploring and as the child is creating the curriculum herself with the construction of a teacher who's working with the child in co-construction. So if I were to end this on conclusions, one, early care and education is clearly the most important consumer decision we as parents can ever make in the lives of our children. What kind of early care and education opportunities we provide them. Two, test drive before you buy. You'd never want to buy an expensive sports car or an expensive luxury car without taking it for a test drive. You'd never want to buy a house without getting in it first, seeing what it looks like and feels like. Do the same thing with your early care and education programs. But when you do test drive it, experience it from an adult perspective, because it needs to be a good place for you as an adult, as a parent, but also try to experience it from the perspective of the child. Consider actually getting on your knees and looking at it and seeing what it looks like from the child's perspective, trying out the furniture, seeing what it actually feels like to be in there. Spend an hour or two with the teacher in the classroom, and then ask yourself, do you want to stay, or can you not wait to get out? Because in the end, that will be a really good indicator as to whether or not you should have your child in that program for 2, 4, 6, 8, or sometimes even more hours per day. So think about these things the next time you're thinking about early care and education, and please have some happy shopping when you go out and do it. Thank you very much.